I was talking yesterday to, in fact, one of my PhD students who asked me about the importance of memory in writing poetry. And of course it's essential, but there's different kinds of memory. One is the memory that we have of something that's just happened, and so we can recall that, and remembering a shopping list, or remembering, anything to do to pick up something from the shops, or to apply anything to a routine day. But then there's emotion memory, which is when we remember things, we have that shock of emotion that goes along with it. And that's the kind of memory we need for poetry. Memories from childhood where you think of it and you get that little shock in the chest, you get that little spark that sets everything off. And it's the poetic impulse for me is emotion memory. And I wrote a poem called Alarm, which is about my dad, but it's so much more than that. It's about the vibe of being a young kid who's largely misunderstood, and also about having a dad who is misunderstood. His dad's been dead over 18 years, and I still think about him in terms of why didn't I understand that about him, and why did he do that, and why did he say that? This poem arrived, Alarm, the poem is called, arrived out of remembering Dad in a particular way, and that is when I realised that the help that he was getting from his sister's husband, my Uncle John, involved a serious amount of pharmacology. And my sister has told me since that she could never understand why Dad wanted her to go with him, because he would need to go to various chemists, and they would have to travel further and further afield, because he became known locally for his Benadryl requirements. So Dad was into speed and addicted to speed and cough medicine. And this poem's called Alarm. The synonym for alarm is the sound of a cabinet being opened, the contents of a bottle shaken into a palm, a tablet selected, water running, a glass replaced with a click, and then my father's face, in light that never failed to give the room and its flock wallpaper a ruinous afterglow. When the drug took effect, his voice broke and he came forward in slow motion, his features out of sync with his breathing, which, as I came to learn, meant his heart was having to work overtime for little reward. "Are you all right?" I'd ask, already knowing the answer. Sometimes he'd stand over me, swaying, or lower himself to the floor as if into a nest of spiders. His eyes, his hands, the inarticulate nature of his demands. So that's a little lyrical poem which is from a book of poems with one-word titles. And the other brief that I gave myself for that book, which is something I've never done before, is that the poems could be no more than a page in length. So it's a little book of hit and runs. This poem, called The Brindle Horses, is a prose poem, and I'd like to show hold that up for the camera because prose poems are certainly come in many different shapes and forms, but this is fairly traditional in a box. The margins are right aligned, and no line breaks, no staggered lines. Prose poems are curious little beasts. They are, as the term suggests, little stories in verse. The brindle horses. The brindle horses have been put out to pasture wearing their golden plumes. In certain light they appear as muscled apparitions out of a pop-up book for those who love equine folklore with a deviant edge. This light, for example, over there, by the entrance to an indoor climbing wall with its colour-coded resin finger holds. Two brindle horses, their flanks lathered white from galloping in heat. One kneels like a trick pony in a pink spotlight. The other bites the hand of a climber who has offered her sugar. Both horses will die before morning, and a climber will fall 7 times the length of her hair. A famous brindle horse can be found in a ballad composed by a retired rodeo clown who lost an eye in a fight over the etymology of the word sprawl. A climber wearing nothing but a leather horse mask will be arrested when she comes down from the summit of a decommissioned electricity tower. The word stirrup means climbing rope. The poems in this book, much like any poems I've written, are fashioned from a combination of memory, deep imagination, and an alignment with pure description and peripheral vision. So I love to take, even subliminally, I love to take what I know and what's in front of me and then apply what might or might not be there, and then put pressure on the images that I create and put enough emotional pressure on them until they crack open and reveal their truths or lies. We were talking earlier about water dragons, the beautiful, like their heads are on a switch sometimes, the way they kind of give you that angular kelpie look, a miniature kelpie look, and the way they sidle up to you, and how great they are at swimming and holding their breath, and their beautiful eyes, and when I think about this poem called Theatre, because of course titles and the subject matter often seem so strangely dislocated until it all comes together. But I was thinking about lace monitors, those beautiful huge lizards, also called goannas, that you know, when they cross a road in late sunlight, look like a pack of diamonds being shuffled, and that beautiful, beautiful coat, and that slinky, side-winding walk that they have, and that long tapering tail. Anyway, so I saw once a lace monitor emerge from a roadkill kangaroo where it had been feasting, and so this poem emerged from that small glimpse of life and death on the Newell Highway. Theatre. When the lace monitor sidled into the still warm body of a kangaroo, road-killed and opened the way some flowers bloom in time-lapse photography, it remained for as long as it takes a road train and wedge-tail eagle to appear. One like an oil bleed on the horizon, its blurred windscreen flashing code for codeine and exhaustion, and one to glide over in wide-angle frames to reconnoitre and consider its options. The only sign a monitor had entered the body of a dead animal being a slight disturbance of the fur below its chest and a low, steady drone that many large reptiles make when feasting alone. Or perhaps the wind had turned, bringing news of 600 horsepower under the polished twin coffins of a Kenworth hood. The shadow of an eagle folding along the kangaroo like a cross that tracks an X-rays passage during a C scan. The monitor emerging with blood in its eyes, its tongue forking samples of percussive air as a B-triple blows past. The last trailer banging away in a haze of diesel smoke, cattle piss and fertilizer. As a lizard sidesteps straps of rubber from shredded tires, the texture and markings not dissimilar to those on a swaying back and tapering tail. Young poets often ask me, certainly beginner poets in first year at university ask me, and high school poets and primary school poets have asked me this too, how do you go about writing good poetry? Well, as Leonard Cohen says, if I knew the answer to that, I'd go there more often. However, apart from the most important thing, which is just to read lots of poetry, is how you get to learn to write it. I think the most important advice I can give anyone is to try to train your eyes, in fact, all your senses, so that when you are out in the world, or indeed just sitting alone, but particularly when you're out in the world where distractions are many, as opposed to the internal hum, of our internal chatter of ourselves when we're alone, when we're out and about, it's important for poets to train their eyes to be able to see beyond what we all take for granted. Now, the way I'd like to define that is to say there are secrets out there in the commonplace that we either have forgotten since early childhood, when things are amazing, because they are, and as adults we learn to sanitize things because we always need to meet routines and be responsible and have jobs and, you know, provide for ourselves and family and friends and lovers, whatever, but and for ourselves. But the most important thing for poetry is learning to recognize those quiet miracles within the commonplace and to write them down when we see them. Mary Oliver, the great late Mary Oliver, once said, it was like finding angels in unlikely places. So when you do see that late afternoon stripe of sunlight on a wall, or the way that particular bit of bark looks like a bird, or the way that overheard conversation as people walk past reminds you of something, don't let it go. Capture it, write it down. And a great example of this is the poet Derek Walcott from the West Indies. the first stanza, the first lines of one of his poems goes like this. A narrow column of sunlight on a barbershop wall gave this stanza its narrow shape. So he was able to recall that beautiful stripe of sunlight on a wall and then apply it to the way that he crafted that stanza in a long, narrow line. So, you know, we don't want to be always going out there in the world trying to turn things into poetry. You'd go mad. But we do need, as poets, to, you know, regularly put ourselves on high alert to the possibility that at any moment we could come across something that arrests our inner attention and stops us in our tracks. And that's what poetry is all about. It's recognizing the otherness, it's recognizing the elsewhere in things. Because it's not just what we see. It's being able to recognize the undersides and the outside of what we see as well. And that's where the real poetry happens. That's where metaphors kick in. And that's how we really need to think about imagery and sensory awareness is an awareness of the potential in things other than its face value.